'Tis many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.
Hello, Declan. Do you hear us in Omagh? Or
Mr.
Mountfield?
McGorgan, is it you?
It is I. Who else would it be?
Oh.
Your only friend in the world
exactly.
you have? Like myself.
Brad, what's happening?
You know yourself, Declan. Day after days. But we're getting there, and it's a whole new experience, and we've all learned from this, haven't we?
Do you know what I have discovered is you lose all track of not time but day.
Yes.
You know, you can punctuate things, say like Easter Sunday or events like that, but every day just rolls. Each day rolls into the next. And, you lose track of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays.
Yeah. What would you say you've learned from all this? Would you say, if someone asked you in a couple of years' time, what do you think?
Patience.
Yeah.
And I think, and to be content with simple things.
Yeah. Well, funny
Get out into the garden and just potter about, and you don't have to rush things and get them over and done with. You can take your time and just get everything done gradually. There's a great story by Liam O'Flaherty called The Reaping Race that a lot of the folks out there might have studied for O-level English. And there used to be short stories on, and it was about a reaping race that takes place, and there are two characters. Considine is a very slow-moving, easy-going man who just methodically takes his time, and his rival is a bull of a man, somewhat similar to Squire Danaher from The Quiet Man, and he is just bulling on ahead, cutting the corn, and Considine is just taking his time, stopping for a break, much to the laughter and guffaws of the people who are watching, and not realising that he is conserving his energy and his strength, and methodically
That's right.
he goes, and his arch rival collapses before the finish line, and Considine, unruffled, just continues. And in a way, that's what I have kind of picked up, just plan things out, and just take your time and it'll get done.
Yeah. Well, I've learned pretty much for me, non-attachment. Things that were important, the things that I thought I had to have, and things seem so unimportant now. Because I know where to go, I have nothing to do. And all the things that I thought that would make me happy if I thought I had all this sort of around me, I've discovered that it's all, it falls away to nothing really, because when you have your, if you have the love of your family and their health and your own welfare, it becomes the most important part of all this, doesn't it?
I would agree with you, yeah.
Anyway.
And, I think prior to this, we had set up a lot of, to use the biblical phrase, kind of false idols.
Yes.
Things that were important, and the things that were important in life, and when you look at even simple things like entertainment, the sort of the nonsensical way that I think people are being led by the nose, and you have to buy into this mass marketed programs, and you're being told by social media, what to think, what to do, what to believe, and I think hopefully this will make people take stock and actually look at really what are the important things in their lives.
Yes.
Not to be told by others.
No.
And also, and hopefully when this is over, that our politicians and leaders will be held to account for,
Yes.
the way that they have dealt with it.
Yes.
And it'll maybe make us look, we might be a healthier society out of it. But,
I think, I'm very optimistic that there will be a good outcome for a lot of people. Unfortunately, a lot of people are under a lot of stress about their businesses. But I think the economy will bounce back quickly, because it did so after the Second World War. You imagine the bombing in London and various cities like that. I mean, there was a huge amount of work done in a very short space of time, and things moved very quickly. When you think 10 years later, we had.
Well, I think maybe the big thing that's going to come out of it is the stark realisation that the most valued members of society are those underpaid people who are working in health and social care.
Yes.
Who have been undervalued. And politicians says, remember, Theresa May, there is no money tree.
Yes.
I hope she hangs her head in shame. And
yes.
I think that I think people should realise that the health workers are making an invaluable contribution.
But everybody does that. Everybody does. If you think of it, people think, because they're in a sort of zero contract hours, that somehow they're not valued. They've been abused to this. And, years ago when we talked to people like Brian Mullen and Peter Kelly and all about the hospital, that was a job for life. And, people had a good purpose to work. Now that all the terms and conditions are taken off them, yet they're expected to be there on the front line now as well. So you're right, there will be changes now.
Oh, I think so. I mean, my Aunt Ina, she died a year ago. She was 97, and she had nursed in the county and nursed in England and nursed in Ballyshannon. And, even in her 90s, she could remember vividly operations that she took part in and patients that she had, and would talk very fondly about them, and actually get quite tearful at times, so especially when she talked about the county, because she remembered the county in its heyday, and she couldn't accept that the county hospital had closed. And in her mind, it was still the county as when she was there in the 1950s. And she was a nurse to the tips of her fingertips. And she just loved the whole vocation of nursing.
It really was a vocation, and still is for
Oh, absolutely.
And should be treated as such, and they should be rewarded as such as well. So
I think so, and hopefully that will come out of when this is over.
Anyway, speaking of yesterday, memories of yesteryear, does that ring a bell with you?
Oh, it does indeed. It rings a bell like the chapel bell in Knockmoyle. Now, is that a hint?
That is a hint. Well, you tell the good people how we came to be there and what we done, and I will try to upload those interviews for us.
Well, a late colleague of mine, a lovely lady called Margaret McAleer, who taught with me in the Brothers years ago, approached us about doing some kind of an oral history, because she was very involved in the community life, in the life of the hall, and had this idea that we would interview people in the locality. And we did it over a number of months, and we met some very, very interesting, fascinating characters. We heard some great music, we heard some great singers, and it was just a pleasure and a joy to do it.
Yes, and it was based loosely around the mobile shop and Doherty's of Mountjoy. There were two Doherty's of Mountjoy. There was Doherty's down at Le Slap, then the other one in Mountjoy as well. And it was, a lot of it told the story because it showed the importance of communities and how they lived and how they supported each other, and the importance of a mobile shop and a local business there to support the local community, and the local farmers. So we talked to, remember the late Maria Trainer, we talked to her. She had a beautiful Dairyland accent. She'd never lost, hadn't she? And she talked about her and her late husband would have worked in Doherty's for years. And then there was Matt Ward was there, remember Matt?
Matt Ward, that's right, and the late Danny Monaghan. Yeah,
and then there was some nice songs, Eamon Donnelly and Brian Donnelly.
Brian,
yes, a couple of nice songs of them. And the late Charlie McMenamin. Do you remember
that's
Charlie?
Right, out of Belfast.
Yes, And then there was John McKinney talked about his mother was actually hired up from Donegal, same as my granny. He talked about the granny, and the positive side of that, because to be fair, people done very well coming up from Donegal, and there's that side of it. And then Paddy McClune was involved, and he talked about the railway crash that time as well.
That's right, Paddy talked about the railway, and he sang.
Yes.
And I tell you why I really enjoyed doing it. My great aunt lived near Lislop. Her name was Mary Ann Collins, and she would have run the youth hostel in Gorton.
Okay.
And she was known as the bird lady. Birds would actually feed out of her hand.
Oh.
And I remember her...
St. Francis just, right?
Yeah, it's like St. Francis. But I remember her in the Camoan Hill home, and she had a shock of white hair, and she just sat and she just sort of was quite imperious. And she was my granddad's sister. And the Herald actually published a photograph of her about, must be about 8 or 9 months ago, that was taken below where they lived. You know, so that's I thought it was just great to get talking to people who would have remembered her. And, you know, so it was nice to just get some kind of a little...
These are short extracts of much longer interviews, and I say we will and could get the longer interviews out for the families if they hear these and they want the full interviews. We'd certainly very happily get them to you in the fullness of time whenever we get parole. So, Declan, we'll run this over 2 nights if you don't mind.
Right.
We'll do it over 2 nights because it would be too long, and we only are allowed maybe an hour or a little over to upload on the internet. Otherwise, things become very unstable for us. So you're going to have memories of yesteryear, part 1, and then part 2 the next night, or as soon as we possibly can. So
That's excellent.
So I'll let you back to...
Down memory lane.
Trip down memory lane, and back to your landscaping, Mr. Ford. I don't know what I'll do.
It's more like hard labour instead of landscaping.
I know, I need a man Friday. Where would I, because I'm stranded out here, I need a man Friday, Declan.
Oh, God save us.
Like Rob's Crusoe.
Well, on that note, Mr. McGurgan, until we meet again on the air, goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Welcome to Memories of Yesteryear. In these CDs you will hear recollections of times and days now gone, all celebrating a way of life which has helped shape our history. The late W.F. Marshall, who was born and educated in this area, stoutly defended the local dialect in his poetry and in his talks broadcast on the BBC Home Service in the 1930s. He had a deep appreciation of Tyrone and the importance of a sense of place. All the voices, the singers and the musicians on these CDs are local people who share one common thread: their deep love for their sense of place. All the participants opened their doors and their hearts for this project, called simply Memories of Yesteryear. They reminisced about old times and a way of life that is but a fading memory for many. These stories are now preserved forever, and it is thanks to the vision of Margaret McAleer that these personal histories are now recorded for all to hear and for future generations. For, in the words of the great playwright Brian Friel, if we have no self-knowledge, we have no knowledge. These recordings took place in the front rooms and in the kitchens of family homes, and we wish to express our gratitude to all the participants for making us so welcome despite the unavoidable technical intrusion. Thank you all for sharing your stories, your songs, and your music.
My husband, he worked in Doherty's shop. He served his time. Then he just had a notion then that he'd spread his wings a bit, and he went up to Daylin. And he was there for a good while, and then he met me. So that was the end of it then. I came back, had to come down with him then. Because he was always going around the country, you seen he was calling at our house every Tuesday with the groceries. That was a good way of getting to know him. He worked in Blake's of Derryland first, and then Jim Doherty then came. He had been with Jim Doherty before that, and then Jim came at him again then to come back to work with him. And that's how we came to be down here. Oh, God, Jim Doherty was the heart of corn, and he was brilliant for everybody. He helped everybody out. And he, if he saw anybody wanting anything, he was there to get them for him. He was very good. He was good to everybody just. And he had to work for everybody. So he had everything that you could ask for, it was in Doherty's shop. No matter what it was. Even to pig meal and coal and everything. There was no cars that time. So they walked and then he'd go out then in the van. They had all the stuff and he'd go out and deliver it to them. And of course the people idolized the van man coming. So they did. He was very adamant about Sunday. He wouldn't, even no matter what emergency came up, well, it'd have to be an emergency for him to go out. There was no such thing as holidays. He thought that it was all a holiday. All the life was a holiday, oh God. He was easy going, but he would be fussy at times now. And it was his big building. You know, as buildings went then, it was big. But it would be only small here now, you know. But anybody got into Doherty stayed in it. So they did. He had farmers come in and he'd set the land at that time, and the farmers would have come in. And, well, it was on a small scale whenever we came here. We came here, when did we come here? In 55. We came down to live here because he had got a job here, you see, and we came down to live here. Whenever you'd come in first and see it, you didn't know what room to go to first. I mean, everyone was nicer than the first one, that's the truth. These ones knew it off by heart because Jim was great for bringing them up to the house on a Sunday. Let them have the whole run of the house now. And I used to be scolded. Untidy in the house, Dina's work. We walked into, you were just mesmerised seeing all the different things and the way the walls were done. And it was just unique, that's the truth, and tiles and all the rest, you know. He was very, very good. He had a great head on him for doing things. That's the truth. Wow. Oh, God, my school days. I had a great time at school. Never got a slap. You walked to Garvey School and you walked home again and you had your lunch in the bag. And there wasn't too many at school that time. But I went to the convent when I was finished. I loved it now, that's the truth. I never had any fault to find. You see, at that time there was no buses, there was no nothing. If you went down to go, I was only 18 miles from Enniskillen, but I had a board. It was navy blue and purple trimming round it, you know. It was lovely uniform. When I left the convent then, I went to Ballymena. Yes, got a secretary's job. And then I finished up in Belfast then. I got married in 1948. Oh, dances were great. You imagined you made up a table. You had ones that you knew who you had picked to go to the table, and they brought the stuff with them. And then they had a big night. Then everybody brought their own stuff, and a big night then, and they were brilliant nights. But there's none of them now. When I look at Doherty's shop, if I was seriously looking at it, I'd be sad. I would, because they held an awful lot of pleasant times for me. And then you were great with everybody in it, and great friends with everybody. And then Jim being such a powerful person, There was nobody ever wanted for anything when Jim Doherty was about.
I was born outside Plumbridge on the 29th of April 1932. I went to school when I was 5 years of age. The first day I went to school, Benny Bonan always says that he took me to school the first day, but I had my other brothers and two sisters, and they're all deceased now and gone. So I went to Castleroddy School. The teachers, which I remember well, was Miss McPhillipy. And then, well, Miss O'Doherty was the main teacher. There were about 50, I'm sure there were about 50 at the school. There were two teachers. And, well, at that time you just learned to read and write and sums. And Miss O'Doherty was very keen for the catechism and the Bible history because she wanted to get full marks when the religious exam took place. Castleroddy School always got excellent on the exams. And she taught that much Bible history and catechism that we could have said it backwards were that used with it. But anyway, I suppose the highlight of the school days was that there were no playground. We played out in the cutting, just out on the road. We played hurling and football on the road and hares and hounds and all this. And I suppose the highlight of the school was that Seamus Kerrigan come to teach us Irish dancing. I wouldn't know what year now, but it was I would say it was in 1939 or 40. Come on his bicycle and taught us dancing. We would learn the Irish dancing, we had jigs and reels and all the figure dancing. Tommy Donnelly was a man played the violin. He learned Benny and them to play since he's dead and gone. He was a postman, and he came over when the teacher was there and he played the fiddle, and we learned the dancing. We danced at the Fish a few times. We danced at sports in Gork, and I can remember going away to, that was the highlight. John Collins and his wee Ford car and Mr. Doherty and our Morissette took us away out. And how we could all get into the car, I don't know. But we landed in Glenmacofer out and we danced at the sports. That was the highlight. And we danced at concerts in Knockmoyle. Remember doing the Gates of Derry. And I remember doing a 3-hand reel with one of the girls had done with Bridget. She was Bridget Nugent, Bridget McBride, she's dead and gone, and Patricia McSwigan. And we done a 3-hand reel at the concert. So, I suppose Castleroddy School, I can remember what the gas masks, none of you would remember the gas masks. They were given out at Castleroddy School, we had to all go, and younger ones got small gas masks, you know, they weren't as big. And then on a set time, the priest come over to the school to hear confessions, such as Christmas and, times like that. It would have been Father O'Callaghan that come over. But I remember this old man lived beside me, Michael Kirk. He was a bit of a character. And him and the late Tommy Kearney, you often hear tell of Tommy Kearney, the thresher man, they were going to confession, but they were talking outside, just talking. And Alice White, she lived in the townland of Cullion too. She was coming out from confession. She came out past them and she stopped and she says, it would fit you better, she says, you should examine your conscience. Oh, I'll Kirk looked at her, he says, when you're living in the townland, you have no call to be examined for you. So that was one of the things that happened to that. So anyway, I suppose then I left. I was at school day, I was 15 years of age. I left in 1947. I worked about, maybe working at turf and gathering potatoes, but I went to work in Doherty's in January in 1948. And I went, I suppose I followed my brother Kevin had spent all his life in Doherty's, and he was the man that tested the eggs. So I was down and I was packing the eggs. That time it was a very busy job, packing to the grader. Maybe Jim was out to two of them grading the eggs up at the light, and then the eggs came down and there was 3 different sorts of eggs. There were A's, they were the large egg, B was the medium egg, and C was the small egg. And you had 3 boxes, A, B and C, and you packed the 30 dozen into that. And then after it was then, it had to be tied with small cords, and then it had to be strapped with a strapping machine and stamped and all this, and they were for the import. So I spent a good while in the store with my brother and them.
Well, where were the eggs sent to then?
Pardon?
When you did that, when you graded the eggs, what happened to the eggs?
Oh,
then?
they were shipped. They went over to Montreal and they all went away to England, or they were shipped from they went to the boat up in Belfast. They went every Saturday morning. The eggs were all taken away. Eggs at that time was the way people had a living. They had no other income. If you had, my mother now would have had 10 dozen eggs in the week, roughly, and that would have kept the house going for groceries and maybe a bag of meal for the hens. But at that time there were plenty of old spuds and old scrap, something that always give to the hens, you see. So there were eggs coming in off the lorries every day. It was a very busy time. You might be packing eggs at 12 o'clock at night. Well, they would come now and again, the inspectors, but my brother, he would have tested them up and Jim, and then if there was any deficiencies in the eggs, that they were called seconds, they were wrote in the docket, you know. If there were blood in an egg, that was a kind of a reject too. And any eggs that was broke was through into an old tin beside the grader, and they went into the model bakery to make cakes. After 3 or 4 days, there'd been a right smell of them too. There were two a light on every side. Jim would only attest it sometimes himself, but Kevin was always tested. It was very sore in the eyes. It was a very busy job, you know. It was relentless. The eggs was coming down. You had to keep the grader, or they were jammed up, you know. You had to be quick. But I could have lifted the 3 eggs in every hand. You could use till it and pack them in. So then, the store now, everything had to be weighed up then. There were no such thing as stuff coming packed. Tea had to be weighed. They come in the tea chest. Tea, sugar, flake meal, oatmeal, baking soda, and all them things had to be all weighed up in the you know, for going out in the lorries and for the shop. And bacon at that time come just big sides of bacon. You know, there were no slicing machine, no machine at that time. So they were just cut with a knife, maybe a pound and 2 pound weight or whatever. But the bacon had to be kept down, and they were placed in the back at the bottom of the store called the pit. I always can remember it was a dark room, no windows or nothing, and the bacon was hanging up there. And it had to be covered with paper. It was covered with paper. And that's the only way they had to keep the flies off it. Jim Doherty went to Derry every Wednesday with a lorry, and he bought most of the stuff. He went down to Malseeds and round there, and I suppose the only 2 remaining men that I remember now in Doherty from that time was Big Tommy McGrade. He still lives in Omagh there. Big Tommy Anthony's is section of the Staffroy Church. His father, he worked in Doherty's. And Benny Monaghan worked a while. Benny came down to work in Doherty's. And that's the only 2 that's left. The rest that I worked with are all dead. I worked from 1948 to 1954. And then I went into the bread trade with Englishes. Well, I started off in Newton Skirt. They had a depot in Newton. I didn't go to Omagh, I was in Newton Skirt. And I worked there for, I was with them, well, I might say 40 years, 39 and a half years. But then they changed over to the Joseph Rank, Mother's Pride. And as the years went on, then I become a spare man or a group supervisor, and then sometimes I'd had to start at 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock, to get the stuff ready for the big stores and go out to them. But I was going to tell you about Doherty's lorries then, where they went, yep. Back to Doherty's again. the big yellow grocery lorry, I can still remember the writing on the side. O'Doherty, your grocer, was up in the top hat. Always served to please you, always pleased to serve you. The great providers. That was on the side of the lorry. On both sides of the big lorry, a big Bedford lorry they had. And I would have been on with three different, me and Eddie Loughery, Tommy McSorley and Danny McCrossan in my time. When I got out then in the store, I was out in the grocery lorry along with them. And that was actually just on a Monday we went down by Gallen into Newton Skirt, or Newton Skirt and then on to Gallen. Tuesday we went down to Legging the Braidway down here and over the hill, over the mountain till the Scabble and on down that country. And Wednesday we went to Rylands outside Gorkin. That was the run there. Thursday Plum Bridge and to Billix. That's where they were telling the joke about the woman in Dunnamana, or outside it. Friday it was local around the Kappa and to Omagh, and Saturday Greencastle. That was the runs for that lorry. But then the smaller lorry, that was in a different run. Jimmy McKenna was in that. But Jimmy was in the small lorry, and on a Monday it would went up round Ergin and up around that. Tuesday it had no run. Wednesday it went to up Barnes Gap and away through. And Thursday into the Plum store, that a store in the Plum. Friday local again, round about. And Saturday out by Falla and Garvan out there. But then in 1952, then Jimmy McKenna, he left and went to Canada, and then I was promoted. I was put on to this. I was a salesman then in the small lorry. But I can tell you about an old lady, you all knows, old Mrs. McDade or Rehan. I used to go to her on a Friday up, and she was an aunt to Teresa McCrory. You know, we Tommy McCrory she was an aunt of hers, and she was a very abrupt big lady. And she says to me when I would sell her the stuff and all, now she says, Mr. Ward, count up your bill. Don't do on yourself. Don't do on Mr. Doherty, or by the man above, she says, don't do on me. I can still remember. She did the same every week.
Lonely I wander through scenes of my childhood. They call back to memory the happy days of yore. Gone are the old folk, the house stands deserted. No light in the window, no welcome at the door. Here's where the children played games on the heather. There's where they sailed their wee boats on the Bourne. Where are they now? Some are dead, some have wandered. No more to their home will the children return. Lonely the house now, and lonely the moorland. The children have scattered, the old folk are gone. Why stand I here like a ghost or a shadow? 'Tis time I
I was born in Mean That's part of our yarn. At home, every place you went into, you were welcome. Any place you went into, there was nobody turned you down or said anything to you. You were welcome. A home place was home. And it was home to them and home to you too. I went to school in Tullycar, and I was only a very short time at it when my mother, God rest her, died. I was taken over to my grandfather's, and I went to school there for a while, Ballymungan, Christ School. And in a couple of months' time, my uncle came from Donegal and took me down to my grandfather's, to my mother's place. I used to run barefoot on the summertime, run barefoot to school. I thought nothing, it was great to get on your bare feet. But I got stony bruise. I got bruises on my toes and on my heels. And I was lame then for weeks, going on one foot, head down and the other foot up. Granny and Granda could talk Irish fluently, because there was a man come that had a girl worked in it with them. And he came from the Gita. He had no English. And they could talk to him. They could talk to him flying. It's great to have your own language. And I went down. The man came from out on a bicycle, and I held on to the handle of the bicycle. That's the cycle I got down 3 miles. This man come for me to herd cows. I was working at a herd cows for 6 months with him. I got £3 for 6 months. I was around about 14. And you got a good bicycle to take you up and get up and down. And I was saying then with a neighbour of us. Next, I was working then. I was working rail work, forking hay, and building it on carts. And I'm telling you, there was no idle time. There was no idle time at times. Way back in those days, there was no idle time. There was no time spent. You done work, real work. But you get a job at night too. You get a job milking cows. There was no idle time. I went then to a neighbour of theirs, just up the road, back the road about. A man. I think it was Maguire. It was Maguire. Oh, Kyle. Anyhow, it was good. Plenty of hard work. Forking hay and building hay and lapping hay, shaking hay, and turf in the bog. He had 2 carts. He had 2 horses, 2 carts. And you went with them. Sometimes you drove one of the horses, and you took a load home, and you got it aired up and got it built under its place, and out for another 2 more load. It was all go. There was no slack in that time. Well, I was hired out with 3. 1, 2, about 3 farmers. The man that done the horse work, he got paid £10 maybe a week, maybe more. They done the horse work and got a pint of milk every day. Home with at night, pint of milk. I don't know if they got eggs, but he got so much ground for potatoes as well, and a pint of milk home with them. I remember that boy with him well. I remember him getting a pint of milk. You know, when I came home then, well, there's tons of work at home. There's plenty of work to do at home. Milk cows, and fodder cows, make hay, get hay ready, and fodder hay, and get hay, give hay to the horse, or corn, or whatever you know. And I could plough that time. I could plough well, and I could dig. I done everything on a farm that ever was done. Ploughed, sowed, reaped and mowed. I worked in Doherty's in my joy for ages and ages. And I drove lorries, all kinds of lorries. I had all kinds of all kinds of cars. When you come back in the evening after you finished up, got the eggs, they collected eggs that time. Yes. And I would have to pack the eggs too. And when you put them into the store, they were people with a light and they put them up, tested them, egg testers. I was sent out with a lorry and a load of grain to people that wanted it, that come in and order grain. You know, feeding stuff of all kinds, and all kinds of meal and flour. All kinds of stuff. I had all that, and coal as well. When you buy a coal, a bag of coal is not light. I killed myself with a small van and getting on bags on my back. And you have to bend down to the floor to get them on your back. Pure murder. I was 10 years then, after I left there, I came home, and I started a bicycle shop. I was 10 years in it, and I fixed bicycles of all descriptions, made bicycles and sold them, and all kinds of bicycles, Crocs and bad ones and good ones.
It's very interesting that McGill himself, who was hired in McSorley, he's outside Newton Stewart, that's where he was actually hired. I mean, he did write in one of his books about some of the positive things about being hired. Although he did a lot of negative things, but he said there were positive things. If you wanted to learn, you want to learn new skills, and you were lucky enough to be with a good farmer who understood all about the sowing and all that, whatever the case might be, then you did learn something, and you could take that skill with you. And being from Donegal, then you could move on to Scotland. And that's exactly what he did. He moved to Scotland after he finished his 3 or 4 years being hired around Tyrone. But my mother would talk about them all right, and she wasn't a bit afraid to talk about them, or ashamed to talk about them, any more than I'm ashamed, because I think they've brought a lot of things to this whole place that nobody ever talks about. They brought their own culture, which is very important. They brought their own music, they brought their own song, they brought their own religion, even though we were Catholics and Catholics here, but they brought their own sort of brand of religion, if you can understand what I think. And they brought a whole new sense of economic awareness. And you may not believe it, and people do not believe it, but they came from very hard times, and they had to struggle very hard in Donegal as well. And I think when we came into the 50s and the bad times in the 50s and the early 60s, these people were able to manage. They were actually the successful people in small farms. They were entrepreneurs. They were people who had put rural development. We're talking about rural development now in the year 2013. But way back in the 1950s, the women, and particularly so many women who came from Donegal, were real entrepreneurs. They had their ducks, they had their hens, whenever there was no money around. So we brought that whole economic thing with them, and the social thing. You just imagine, you know, there are 6,000 people passed through Fintown, it's reckoned, on their way to Tyrone to be hired. And that's amazing to think about that. And you think if you were a young guy maybe around this part and maybe young girls coming to be hired, you can imagine there would have been social interaction. There would have been a sort of an awareness of, oh, I wonder what's going to happen in November. Will a new lady come to McGinn's or a new lady come somewhere else, whatever the case might be? You can imagine that if you just try and think about that. And a lot of them married up here. I mean, my mother at 20 married my father. And my father was a lot older. He was in his late 40s. But that wasn't uncommon in them days. He was the youngest of the family, and of course everyone else had gone, so he had to stay behind, look after his mum. And then whenever his mum unfortunately died, then he got married, and that's the way it was. And and my granny would have talked about, we used to go to Donegal on holidays, and my granny would have talked about being hiring, and she was hired in the same house, which is just 500 yards from here, a house called McCollum's, and she was hired on it, and then my mother was hired on it, and her uncle was hired up in the Higgins, which is really up in the slap there. They were hired up in the Higgins, and wasn't it always big rich farmers who hired people? And I think that's something, you know, we need to remember. Sometimes it was the smaller farmers, sometimes the small tenant farmer who needed some help and needed some assistance hired it. The heyday would have been the late 1800s and the early 1900s, and from that on then it started to sort of decline. And you've got to think what the Industrial Revolution, you see, was coming on as well. Mechanisation was taking over, and that all helped to, you know, that helped to sort of stop that whole thing as well, because you had tractors where you didn't need horsemen, you know, and that really was the whole change around the 1940s. And come to the 1950s, the whole thing was all over. But it was really in the 1930s. My mother came in about 1935, 1934. She came here at 14. But she'd been hired out before. She was hired out in Donegal to relations, albeit relations affairs, but hired out to Donegal to look after an old aunt, and then to go to school down in Ranafas. And she went to school down there, and she tells some great stories about going to school there, about how all the kids down there were much smarter and much cleverer than they were up in Fintown. And she used to always say to us, you know, I think it was all the fish she used to eat. Maybe it was to get us to eat the herring on a Friday, I'm not too sure, but that was sort of, she used to say, it must be all the herring and all the fish we're eating. But my mother, like, I mean, and to her, obviously, I've great admiration. She was a woman hired in McCollum's, just down the road, and she was rehired, you know, for 4 or 5 years. She was rehired between the two houses, So obviously, they were happy with what she was doing, and she must have been reasonably happy, you know, with as well. And I suppose then she met my dad as well, and that was perhaps another attraction to stay on another year or whatever the case might be. And you know, a relationship would appear to have been built up between the farmer hiring someone and then hiring again. For example, like my granny was hired in the same house, and then her daughter was hired in the same house. So that would give you an indication. It wasn't like, you know, a market, if you understand. It was like relationships, where relationships had developed over a number of years between families here and people coming from Donegal, and sometimes that's mistaken as well, you know. I think there were people maybe coming for the first time, and I did hear my granny saying, I actually asked her that question one time, how did you know if you wanted to be hired? I remember asking her whenever, many years ago, and she said, well, you know, we men used to carry little bundles with them. And she said you used to have a little bundle, and that meant then that was your clothes. And then if the farmer thought you were strong enough, he hired you. And then he would have given you a shilling or two to sort of seal the contract. And then that was you. That's the way it worked. Payment would have been given at the end of the 6 months. My mother earned £6 for 6 months. But everything's relative, you know, and we have to think about that. And if you're actually thinking about today, I mean, a lot of young kids today from around here and from Donegal to go off to Australia, they don't have much say in how they determine what wages they're going to get. You know, we might think, you know, things are wonderful and we've moved on a lot. But we have job markets. We have job fairs. It's a different name for a different system. And people coming from a very poor background, they were probably glad of getting that little bit of work, and £6 probably helped if he gave back £4 or £5 to the mum and the dad back home. It probably helped them to get them over very hard times. I'm not in any way trying to paint a rosy picture about hiring, but what I'm saying is, you know, it was the there and now. It was how things were. You know, money was scarce, times were bad, and the point I want to make, people hiring out here, I can name other families here who hired out in Tyrone, not too far away from here, actually in the parish of Capel, that weren't just big rich landlords. And I mean, there's a story told from a cousin of my mother's who was hired out, and telling how he went to a market with a man who hired him, and to get the money to pay for everything at the end of November, and to get the money to pay him. I mean, so there was more to it than that. As far as I understand, it was a contract between them, and for labour you got £6, or for a young woman working in the house that could do baking and milking and all that would have got £6. And the woman, like my mother, would have been expected to milk 9 or 10 cows. Let's make no mistake about it. I mean, as well as do the housework, and that was a contract. Now, if you were a good ploughman, but you wouldn't have been recognised as a senior ploughman if you were being hired in Strabane. And what happened? But some people were hired and showed an aptitude, and then apparently then they might have got £7 the next time, and they could have got up to £9, or they could have maybe got £12 if they're a real top hand at doing some particular thing. So there was a hierarchy in the whole thing. There was just a general labour, and then the sort of skilled labour, and then there was the top ploughman or top horseman. But my mother, I'm thinking back to about the 1950, maybe 54, 56, I can't remember when, but we had a field full, this is true, we had a 2-acre field above the house, and it was full of hens, Rhode Island Reds, and she had hundreds and hundreds of these hens, and they grazed in the field. You know, it's not a new thing now to see hens out grazing, like as if it's some rural development, wonderful thing that someone thought about. And then we had all these houses at the end, put them in at night and all. And my dad, God rest him, and I helped him as well, and we fenced around to keep them from escaping, or to keep the old Renard out as well, whatever the case was. But then eggs were a very big thing, because eggs was a currency. Eggs was a currency of the rural society. And when Doherty's van came along, the eggs were carried out to the end of the lane, and a couple of boxes of eggs, 60 dozen or whatever I think was in the boxes, they were taken away, and they were just recorded in the book, and then you got your groceries and you got your meal, whatever the case might be. And to be honest with you, I don't ever remember any money being handed over. It was a barter type of system. You sold the eggs and you got the meal and you got your food, and that's the way it was. And then my mother would have moved in for Christmas, would have had old turkeys, loads and loads of turkeys, would have had geese, and just provided them the money for Christmas. So it was an ongoing entrepreneur. And in terms of vegetables, like my mother would have grown all her own vegetables. She would have had her own plot beside the house, would have grown everything we needed for a house in terms of vegetables. So very self-sustaining subsistence. And then we never went hungry, that's one thing for sure. And she made sure we always had food on the table. Churned milk and old butter, and made the butter, and milked the cows, churned, and that was the whole thing. And I think, you know, it's getting back to, I think, the richness that some of these people brought from Donegal. And you can see it, I'm very positive and very pro with people who came from Donegal, because they did provide something in this society which a lot of people, I think, have forgotten about. My mother had 3 or 4 cousins here, and like the Maguires, the Nugents, the McGraths, in Omagh, and you can see they were all entrepreneurial. They all provided, you know, and enriched the whole society in which they lived.
1950 was a very black year for Omagh and the railway, because on the 24th of November 1950 there were 4 men killed on the railway line at Omagh station. And that's why I sort of did that particular time. And I knew all those men, married men, good hard-working men. There was Charlie Flanagan, the ganger, Dan McCrory and John McCrory and John Cassidy and John Cleary, all working, hard-working men. And they were on the line working, and it was that in November it was a chilly day and very, very foggy. And they should have been off the line long before this thing. Apparently the drill was when a train would be due, a bell would ring on the platform. The Enniskillen train had come in and parked stationary on the opposite line. And the next train due was the Belfast train through to Derry. It was late, and they decided in their wisdom or otherwise to bring the Derry train in first. And as a result, the men were expecting this train to come in, and worked away till out of the fog come this thundering thing and mowed them down. They said that one man tried to scramble up on the platform but was caught and went onto the wheels again. And it was horrible. It was like slaughter in the war. I remember being in the goods office that morning and I heard this call about the exact accident over in the railway station. And I went over and walking along the platform and I looking down at between the lane and the carriage, you see this face looking, dead face looking up at me. And like it was like a half a body. It must have been cut too. And the blood all over the place. And then looking up along the lane, further along the lane, between the two lanes, there was a trunter called Macaulay, cradling a man on his knees. And even at that distance I could see the blood pumping up there. And it wasn't panic, but there was this air of nearly silence, weirdness about the place. And then a young Dr. McMullen, who had just started his practice in Omagh at the time. He was from Fintona, the Mullins of the pub in Fintona. He arrived on the scene, but it could be nothing. And then the priests and the police and the ambulance came, but nothing could be done. The remains were taken away. And I remember being invited to a meeting in Roddy O'Connor's office with the solicitor, along with the station master and some urban council, to set up a fund for the bereaved. And we settled down on how it would go and how it would start. And I must say this, there was a great response from the whole community. They responded very well, and they definitely stood by those families,
It's not far
days laid by, gonna fear no more. Mama's there expecting me, Papa's waiting too. Lots of